Hey Frank,
Hey,
how you doing?
well, struggling with Zoom, but other than that, I'm fine.
Well, that's bad enough. So you got to I saw your, just real quick, I saw your post about the trip to the VA,
Yeah,
and I sent you a reply because uh, the William Stafford poem, just, it still may came fine, but you'll see that.
I'm going to turn a
Uh,
light on over here.
yeah, I see John, are you there?
Well, let's see. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Well,
Do you have the window pulled back? I sometimes I cover up the window and then
oh, wait a minute. You're right. I forgot to put my camera up
oh,
even.
there you are. There you are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I
that
think I
works.
was doing and forgot about it altogether.
We are recording.
Okay. So how we doing?
Let there be light.
Yes, there is. So, Frank, you want to lead off or you
Yes, I'll lead off, and for any that happen to catch this uh, video, I'm Frank Watson. Uh, to to your left is Tom Probasco, and there, and then there's John Lowe, and this is Poof. We call it poof because we talk right up until it goes poof, and then that's the end. So
it's a
uh,
cute word. It's a cute word. I like it.
I like it too. It's whimsical, and I'm a
Yeah.
great fan of whimsy. Right now, it's been a busy morning. I had a VA appointment, and they offered me transportation today, and I took it, and then I had to um, hook up with them on the way back. It was for a very early appointment. And I just managed to come in, and I tried the link that popped up, and then I thought, you know, I better go to the little Zoom icon and go directly there and copy the link on there, which I did, and it's a good thing because I was ready when the first link didn't work. I was already sending the second or third, whichever it is.
I
Uh,
saw the second.
it's
So, so here we are.
Yeah,
Here
here we
we
are.
are.
We managed to get here, and I appreciate you fellows sticking with it there. I'm going to keep trying to get it adjusted so that it works right, but this is a learning curve. It's a free account, and I appreciate free. A little bit extra elbow grease or mental grease or whatever it is, and here we are poofing away.
You have to
So
embrace the poof with the free
yes,
version.
so I I had a very fine visit from my son. He was here for a couple of days, and hadn't seen him since my oldest son's funeral. And his lady friend in Ireland uh, told him he should go and visit his dear old dad, and he said, "Okay," and it was an excellent visit. Uh, and just for a more complete update, uh, I was changing some of the plans for how my angels, which are my two stepdaughters, God love them, they're wonderful, would uh, work. One of them is due here any minute, and uh, So I had my plans all set, and they got together, and the plans have been rearranged somewhat, and that's okay. I just have to get caught up on what they are. But I try to go in, if I can go into VA at 8 or 8:30 for a medical appointments, I can typically get home before Barbara wakes up. Some days that's more important than others. I also have a Ring account, which places a video camera and microphone and speaker in our living room. So if Barbara should get up, I can check, and if she's up, I can talk to her and explain to her what's going on. So I have a lot of different medical appointments because I'm trying to make sure that I stay alive. Her quality of life depends a great deal on my being alive, and I don't want her to have any unnecessary lowering of her quality of life. If I'm with her, she's an independent living. She has agency. She has family caregivers. If I'm not with her, she would probably have to go to memory care. Or somebody, my oldest stepdaughter would have to quit work. She wants to work for 2 more years. So I was trying to be more active at church, but I have had to back off from a committee assignment and some plans I was making to attend in person. I can participate virtually through Facebook and Zoom, but going to church means arranging either to take Barbara or to arrange care for her. She typically is not up by the time church starts, and often not until the coffee hour after church starts. So what I'm arriving at is that not only is it important for me that I have Facebook and Zoom, it's important for Barbara, and it's increasingly important in our world. As I was riding to VA and looking at the river of cars in the early morning darkness, the thought occurred to me that there's major changes in how we do things that we have to make. And even then, our quality of life is seriously endangered by the environmental damage that's already done. But the carbon that's going into the atmosphere, my son's visit on an airplane put carbon into the air. My visit to downtown Indy to the hospital put carbon in the air. People driving to work put carbon in the air. And I think that the cost of this sort of transportation is going to drive massive changes in how we are living our lives and how our societies are arranged. It's also going to impact us spiritually as we contemplate the necessary changes and add our votes or our inclinations of our hearts to what we're doing. So how's that for a rousing start to our poof? Give me credit, I didn't take us all the way to poof. I didn't poof out on you. So.
Well, what you brought out there regarding the environment, climate, uh, sort of takes us back to what Tom was raising with Wendell Berry. It seems very much related. Isn't that right, Tom?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Did you want to go any further into that direction yourself, Tom?
Uh, no, it's what I do think of is the even at this late date, the varying perceptions of what some will call, we'll say, the climate emergency, some crisis emergency, they vary for whatever reasons, is if you live outside, and even in areas that aren't currently on fire or 112 degrees, even here in Indiana, if you live outside, you're much more aware of what's happening. And if you live mostly inside, and I notice this in talking with people, if they live in the quote unquote built environment, they still, around here and a lot of other places, are protected. And so it's harder to listen and perceive. It's easier to doubt. I won't go into the details, but that happened just the other day. And it's hard to get that across. That's all I'll say about that right now. But those who live in the built environment, unless it's currently being burnt down, which has happened and is happening, there's a bigger disconnect than those who are out there putting shingles on roofs, gathering crops, planting crops, working out of doors. If you've done that all your life, you may not agree with why of it, but you certainly do notice it majorly. So anyway, that's my thought about that, John.
When you were speaking there about outdoors, for some time, back to my youth, when I look up in the sky, I was quite young, all the stars you could see. Oh, it was a panorama.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen it like that for decades and decades. You see stars, but you don't see all the splendor that was there when I was a child.
Light pollution is talked about.
Well, it's just not there. Why it is? Well, it must be in the air that it's compromised. The atmosphere is compromised that we don't see the sky clearly, as certainly as an astronaut would, not by any means.
Yeah.
Then
Well,
we see these new telescopes with you have the Jim Webb now, and then they have the new Euclid. And my heavens, what you can see there.
Oh my, yeah.
It's amazing what they're discovering. And so they say if they go up, just an astronaut to go above the atmosphere as it is, just what a few miles up.
Yeah.
You see the stars somewhat a little bit more like I did as youth.
Yeah.
And so yes, indeed, we are changing in our atmosphere and the climate. And we can talk about it, but there's really not going to be any change. And it just brings up politics.
Yeah, politics.
What else would it be?
Yeah.
It has to be handled politically. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what those who think about these things work. They talk about the political will. And in a lot of cases, that political will just isn't there. Where did you live, John, when you're describing your youth and looking up? Where did you live at that point, if I can ask?
Catch your hat, Indianapolis.
Okay, so you were in town.
East side of Indianapolis.
Okay.
And we lived on our house lived on a hill somewhat. And we could lie out on that hill and we put a blanket down on the grass. And we look up and my heavens, the sky was so beautiful.
Yeah.
all the stars and constellations and so forth and so on. And once in a while, you'd see some meteors, so a little shoot of
Yeah.
meteor there. And lo and behold, oh, it was quite unusual for Indianapolis to have the Northern Lights.
Yeah.
Did you ever see them? You wouldn't think so in the Midwest,
Right.
but we did that
Yeah.
particular summer. So anyway, yeah, I think that effect is very prominent, and you notice it as you get older, and I'm sure you too. I don't know your ages. I haven't gone into. I know a little bit more on Frank's age, I think.
Yeah, I'm 69. I'll be 70 before the year's out. But the light part of the effect is light pollution. Our son is
Mhm.
our son is now works. He's essentially a farmer, becoming a soil expert. He lives way out. He lives in Tennessee. There's no no big town nearby. And in his place, on a clear night, it reminds me of what I saw when I lived in the country decades ago, just outside of Xenia, Ohio. So some of it has to do, at least some of it has to do with what's called light pollution, and there's more of that. So when you lived on the Near East Side back when, there was less of that. So that's
Right. I
part.
will say though, that was during the summertime, but in the wintertime,
Yeah.
they use coal for heating
Yes.
and coal, and you take a bus down. I lived on 10th Street, and we go west downtown,
Yeah.
and you could see about Woodruff Place, right about then, maybe a little sooner than that. Just a blanket of sudden
Yeah.
black
Right.
darkness.
Yeah.
And then you go into it, and then you didn't realize it was that way. But when you went into it, of course, my dad was working down there all the time, worked downtown. And so as a child, I would go in on my poor dad has to live in this all the time.
Yeah.
And we would go then, did some travel in the West, out West, in towns like Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and they didn't use coal back those years. And we looked at these buildings, how clean they looked,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there was that smudge and such of burning coal that was pretty bad. Places like Pittsburgh must have been awful.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Where there's a
The
steel
steel
mill.
mill,
Yeah.
dairy, and places like that.
Yeah.
So those are the environment problems. And then Frank, you had mentioned the 6 inches of soil.
Yes.
Terrible. That took me back to the 30s again. And do you remember in history the Dust Bowl
Yes.
problems?
Yes.
And remember what famous book was written and movie made by it? The Grapes of Wrath.
Yes.
Steinbeck.
Remember that?
Yes.
And they had these huge dust storms that just blanketed, to Oklahoma and all those, and Texas. Well, why did they do that? What happened? Well, they had defoliaged all the trees out and planted things, all the grasses and so forth. And then when it all dried out, and they didn't have the means of holding down the soil, and so when the wind came along, it just blew everywhere. It was awful.
I have a take on that, and that is part of the process of creating the Dust Bowl was the white settlement of the plains areas
Mm-hmm.
when they killed the buffalo. They killed off the buffalo in order to starve out the Native American population.
Yes.
And then with the buffalo gone, the farmers moved in, tilled the soil, and destroyed the plains in terms of an ecosystem. consisting of deep-rooted grass and sod. And then when they had done that, the farming practices did not allow for the protection of sufficient soil, and that resulted in the Dust Bowl. So the Dust Bowl was basically driven by European settlement of Native American land, and the racism involved in that.
Yes, yes. There was I lived in California a couple of years, and there was a town called Sepulveda there. And that word indicated that the Indian was an inferior creature. That's the way they interpreted back in those earlier years.
Yes.
Well, this when you raised two at the time, it sort of takes us back to the last meeting. The American Indian, of course, the diet changed. And then I brought up the question, what about the American diet? And that may have had an effect on the Indian too. And take, for instance, the goals of commercial food production and corporations. What's the motive of all these in the grocery store, all those stacks, cereal and all this, that, and the other? What's their motive?
Profit.
Yes.
It's profit driven by
business. Yes, food, but bigger sales and greater appeal is to make it taste better and for shelf life, so that it doesn't disintegrate. But what is it that they do to make it taste better?
a lot of it is sugar and salt.
Super sweet corn syrup, intensified syrup.
And it's worse if it's artificial. Sugar's bad enough, but the artificial is worse yet. It ain't natural.
Yeah, you were.
The best is the maple. They say maple and honey's the best, on natural sweetening.
Raw honey. Yeah, you were talking about that at the end of our last meeting, John, about processed food.
Yes, and so we came back to it, and it's connected with what you were brought up from the very beginning with Wendell. I believe I'll try to pull that in a minute, but sugar, salt, starches, synthetic fats. Let's see here, what else I've written down? Artificial flavoring, and then for crops, of course, insecticides, and then for meat and animals, artificial or the word should be unnatural feeding for the animals. They don't just go out and eat in the fields and eat if best, they would do better with straw, but then the hormones that they give them. So all that affects, us. So little reason that we have so much diabetes and obesity and heart problems and all this sort of thing, even cancer. It says sugar feeds cancer.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is to look at the ingredients. They force them to do that.
Yeah.
And that's political, of course, in that. But all you have to do is read the ingredients, and then really what's there. Well, you have to be apprised of that somewhat. Well, what is this kind of fat? And what's the best kind of fat? And so forth and so on. So anyway, we need to apprise ourselves. Unless you go to a food store, a grocery, that so much of what is there in the groceries that we attend so much of is really very much corrupted. And the advertisement is even on the box and the labels. Advertisement, it's slanted, it's out and out lies, you know.
Yeah.
And so we're the consumer. So again, we buy into this without realizing it.
And the
Yeah.
whole
It's part of
thing,
the-
the whole thing continues to develop from the events of the post-revolutionary time, when Alexander Hamilton brought about the tax laws for taxing farmers. And it was a lot of the small farmers didn't have access to cash. They couldn't pay their taxes. A lot of them had to turn their corn into alcohol and then take the alcohol and sell it. And the government wanted big enough organizations to be able to make it cost effective to go after the tax money so they could run the government. Now, this had an interesting turn. It drove the development of corporate ownership, large ownership, consolidation of farms. And along the way, the larger corporations got so big that they could hire lawyers, show all their losses, and ask for subsidies rather than pay taxes. This whole process then of corporate ownership developed, and the development of the larger cities, which was more convenient for that particular lifestyle and business style, developed, which resulted in the small towns and farms being consolidated into larger cities and agribusiness. A return to the sort of life proposed by Wendell Berry might possibly save the planet.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a book by a woman by the name of, her last name's Klein. And she wrote a book called This Changes Everything. And it was a kind of one of those two-part things. So if we don't get a grip on the kind of things that you both are talking about, and so that capitalism, unfettered capitalism, if that goes forward without changing, then the environment becomes unlivable. But the other thing that could happen is the thing you just suggested, Frank, is if we turned and recognized enough that we have to live in we have to have a different economic structure other than unfettered capitalism, then that's the other way it could go. So that's why her title, yeah. Naomi, her name just came to me, Naomi Klein. This changes everything.
The greater likelihood, or one likelihood that our system would drive us toward, would be a return to feudalism and serfdom.
That's right.
So as to reconnect the common person with the soil, so that the connection between the individual and the soil could increase the organic methods of growing and smaller scale distribution of food.
Well, you had your serfs, and then the lords were the protectors of the serfs.
Yes.
And you had the church then intertwined, whether it's Protestant or Catholic, either one, intertwined with the princes and the secular government. system, I should say. And then what changed all that?
The thing that will drive the changes is not just life or death, but profits or lack of them and tax collection.
Well, even before that, then you had guilds that people wanted to break away from the stereotype of three levels, so to speak, of economy. There are those serfs who they had talents they wanted to develop beyond just near the land. And so they built guilds. And then this started collecting people that were doing different things and therefore came along. What you're saying too is that it started a system toward, we would say, capitalism. But then what changed that to a great deal? And one thing we've been talking pretty much about the agrarian, but what about labor? That came also with this. So what wasn't it, the Enlightenment? What was the Enlightenment? Changed everything.
Well,
Which was really a product and a good thing. How many of us would be alive if it wasn't for medicine?
one of the things that changed everything was the plague. When the plague hit, it hit hard. It made it increased the value of the individual laborer, and they were able to go from where they had been committed to a landlord to another landlord or to a trade because of the great need for people. A lot of ownership was ended because the owners died. So there was all that involved in the process. And
but it was the Enlightenment, science, in medicine, education, Industrial Revolution, all these things that came along with Dickens, the pollution of the cities, the blight, but the Enlightenment, and this was all new.
Well, look what we have now. We have the internet.
Well, yeah, this is a stage after that. Good night. So well, there was electricity that came along and how to use electricity. And of course, the wheel had been learned way earlier than that. But the steam engine, and then finally gasoline engine, then electric.
Coal.
Coal, yeah. There you go. Talk about atmosphere and the fossil fuel. You see, all that came along.
Yeah.
And sort of pushed our whole civilization. But the Enlightenment was fantastic, and we still are benefited from all that. We have our problems, don't we? We have our viruses, COVID-19, and these things still can come along, but we are able to, figure out a virus, what do you call it, the medicine to counter that, and we've been able to do that. So then big changes too in World War I, geographically.
Yeah.
1/3 of the young men that were of ability were killed in that war, whether it's England, France, or Germany. 1/3 of the young people, men.
Yeah.
And from that point on, people stopped going to church because each side said, God is on our side. God is on our side. And of course, World War II is just a continuation of that, really.
Yeah.
And then when God is out of the picture, then you have, as Nietzsche said, anything can go. And then what takes over is power. If God is not there to support and be a bolster against all this inequality, advantages of one or another. If the spiritual is not there, then power takes over. And we had two prongs to develop, communism or fascism. And what I'm saying is we have it today. Same thing, same poles of influence and extremism. And we have to decide. I'm way ahead of ourselves in a way, but it's very much tied in with what we're saying here. But we have to decide which way you want to go, to Antifa, or you want to go to fascism.
Well, I think we can,
There's good or bad on both sides.
when you say we have to decide,
Politically,
uh,
and that bears on the very things we're talking about, the atmosphere and all that. Yeah.
a direction will evolve from the many people who decide and how they decide. I don't know.
But we're part of it.
We can be part of it, and if enough people have the conversations such as we are having here,
Right.
and the technology exists so that it can happen, then we may be able to influence the change. There will be other influencers, the ones that we know about, the big ones, the corporations, the militaries, the governments, and then there will be ones that we don't know about, the investor class, the owners of the war machines, that produce the guns, and the ones that produce the butter, and their conversation. But there will also be the influence of artificial intelligence, and we don't know how that will be. My little dog here is trying to get my great granddaughter's attention.
So this is all part of the Enlightenment. See, it's just the extension of Enlightenment. And
Well,
we
the
can't go back-
Enlightenment,
we can't go back to feudalism.
no,
We can't
well,
go back. Yeah, go ahead.
never say never. We don't know what can happen and what can't, but we can incline our hearts, and I think that how people develop conversations and where those conversations go, I would like to see more people of our ages engaging in conversations like this, which is one reason. It is the main reason that I'm doing what I do in terms of encouraging consumer technology to promote conversation, greater number of conversations, a movement away from the larger production companies and television stations and the great entertainment centers into Facebook and TikTok and Zoom. And I think, John, your experience, and Tom, your experience in reading and my experience in reading lead us to the place where we should have a lot more people poofing around.
Right. And I'm going to say bless you, Frank, for your contribution and your vision on this.
I'm hoping sincerely that it inspires others to look at what we're doing and reach out to their friends and have these conversations. But wherever they're at and however they do it,